Hello, I'm Bruce August-Stenson, and I'm going to take you through the standard histology workflow that you'll see in a routine histology pathology laboratory. Okay, we are now in the first step of the process. Your specimen has been received from the operating room in a pre-filled specimen container. This pre-filled container contains nutribuffer formalin that will help preserve the tissue and keep it in its natural state to prevent any type of decay before a diagnosis is made. So depending upon the size of the specimen, it would directly depend upon the size the specimen is received in. So the tissue is removed from your container. You put on the cutting board inside the grossing lab. This would be our grossing station. The physical characteristics of that specimen will be recorded. The size, the color, the weight, the texture. In this case, I have a very small specimen. Sometimes you get much larger specimens. In that case, they will take a larger knife, cut the specimen down to smaller pieces using one of our trim blades or a disposable scalpel, and to cut it to an appropriate size. One of the unique things that Avantic offers is a trim blade dispenser. This is something that we developed based on customers' feedback to improve the safety inside this part of the process for cutting your specimens. This is a dispenser filled with sharp blades. All the sharp edges are facing down. You basically just place your handle over the blade, tighten the screw up, lift the blade out, and now your blade is loaded safely onto your handle without ever touching the blade. So going back to my next step here, so now I have my specimen with all the physical characteristics recorded. Now we want to mark the specimen. The specimen is marked with a different colored marking dies. The marking dies will signify or designate different areas of the specimen, whether it's the top, the bottom, the left and right. A lot of customers will do blue for the top, green for the bottom for grass, right is red, and yellow perhaps for the left. And that really depends upon the particular laboratory. So once that tissue is all marked with the marking die, usually with a piece of with a toothpick or a applicator stick, that tissue needs to be put into a tissue cassette. Tissue cassettes come in a wide variety of different styles and types. Some come with the lids on, some come with the lids off. This particular one is called a biopsy cassette, very small holes compared to our routine cassette. So what they would do here is, in this case, I'm going to use a biopsy sponge. Little blue plastic sponge is put into the bottom of the cassette. The tissue is put in on top of that sponge, and then another sponge is added on top, which will help hold that tissue in place and prevent it from potentially coming out of the holes. Once that tissue is encapsulated into the cassette, it is put into our tissue basket, which is also submerged in a nutribuffer formalin solution that would prevent any type of decay of the specimen before it gets processed. From there, the specimen is removed from the formalin solution and brought over to our tissue processor for tissue processing. Okay, so my tissue is taken from the grossing table where we put all of our specimens in the basket and loaded into our tissue processor. Tissue processor, the main purpose is to remove all the water from the cells in the tissue and infiltrate the cells in the tissue with paraffin, so you have some stability, and it also helps fix the tissue. So this process normally runs for about 6 hours, 8 hours, so it's normally run overnight. So when the technician leaves at the end of the day, they'll turn the machine on and it'll be ready when they come in the morning around 5:30, 6 o'clock or so. So inside this tissue processor, there's a lot of different types of reagents, everything from xylene to formalin to alcohol. And if you put those reagents in the wrong spot, you could run the risk of really damaging your tissue. So what we did is we came out with a color-coded labeling system that enables you to put the label on the tissue processing bottle that directly matches the chemical, in this case the alcohol, that we're putting inside the tissue processor. This will help alleviate any chances of a technician accidentally putting the wrong reagent in the wrong spot and preserving your tissue. Once your tissue processor is done processing the tissue basket is put inside your embedding center, which will be sitting inside a paraffin bath here to ensure your tissue stays moist again. You can never let your tissue dry out. At this step of the process, we're going to create paraffin blocks with our tissue inside it. So this machine is nothing more than a glorified dispenser that will dispense wax if I push the button, and there's a cold plate over here. So the first thing you do is you take out an embedding mold. Embedding mold is set on top of our work surface. My tissue is opened up out of the cassette that we put it in before at the grossing station. Okay, I'll get my forceps, which is heated in the back here, remove my sponge. This will be thrown away at this point. Take my piece of tissue, carefully put that tissue inside my mold. So at this point, I want to dispense a little bit of paraffin by pushing this button, and that will enable me to make sure this tissue is fixed all the way down or stuck all the way down to the tissue. Then your cassette, you basically just break the top off the cassette, it's disposable, place it on top of your tissue inside the mold, and you fill this tissue cassette up with paraffin. After that's done, it's moved over to the right-hand side on what we call a cold plate, and it'll sit there for about 10 minutes to a half hour, and that piece of paraffin, tissue I should say, block, that paraffin will harden up, and you'll now have a block of tissue, which looks like this once we knock it out of our mold. And from there, it goes over to our microtome, and then it will be cut. Okay, the next step in our process would be to take our paraffin block and cut this specimen with the paraffin about 3 to 5 microns thick. Your specimen can be loaded to your specimen clamp on your microtome in a horizontal fashion or in a vertical fashion. That's a personal preference depending on the laboratory. Inside the microtome, you'll be loading a blade. The blade would go inside your knife holder. There's 2 different styles of blades. There's a high-profile blade and a low-profile blade. These blades are very sharp. The high-profile blade would be about a ½ inch tall, and the low-profile blade would be about a ¼ inch tall. These blades are very dangerous. In fact, there's a lot of laboratories out there that will not let the technicians pick up the blade by themselves. They'll use one of our Avantic magnet brushes to pick up the blade and dispose of it in an appropriately friendly way in their sharps container. Okay, now the specimen is loaded into our block. We'll just turn the hand wheel of the specimen, and what that's going to do is create a nice ribbon, which is a series of specimens blocks, or specimen slices I should say, cut in a fashion where they're just going to keep linking to each other. You grab both sides of that ribbon, you lay it onto your water bath, and now that will enable your tissue to relax. This is set at an ideal temperature so the paraffin will relax enough but not melt the paraffin. Your technician will take their forceps, separate out the specimens that they choose to be the nicest ones cut. They'll go underneath that specimen with a glass slide, pick up that specimen, and then put it inside their slide rack for the next step in the process, which is staining. Okay, the next step in the process, we take our slides that we just cut on our microtome and put them in an automatic stainer. Now, our tissue on these slides is surrounded in paraffin. So what has to happen first is the slides go into the stainer, and then the stainer goes into a built-in oven, which starts the melting process of the paraffin. From there, it goes into a bunch of different chemicals, starting with xylene and alcohol, to deparaffinize the slide, remove the paraffin from the slide, and then it goes into the staining process. Some laboratories that are of a higher workflow will choose to use an external oven and put their slides in the oven externally, which will speed up the process and enable to get more throughput in the laboratory. So once your slides go in your stainer, about 40 minutes later, they'll come out and they'll go into what we call a cover slipper. After your slides are stained, it goes into a cover slipper. Some machines connect together directly so that the slides will automatically transfer the cover slipper like this unit does, or some machines or laboratories have them that are independent units and they have to manually transfer them. In this situation, our slides transfer over automatically. You take your slides out, the output rack, and they will have that thin cover slip on top. This cover slip protects the tissue from damage from accidentally rubbing against it, and also prevents from drying out from just access to the environment. Okay, now that we have our slides cover slipped, nicely stained, their slides are laid out into a cardboard slide folder. This cardboard slide folder will then be transferred over to the pathologist, who will observe these slides carefully under a microscope and determine whether the tissue is diseased, cancerous, or healthy, and then they will be later filed in a slide storage system.